So we want to thank them for that. We also want to welcome Dr. Ryan Fisher, who joined us today. He's the associate, the dean from the College of Communication and Fine Arts. So thank you for coming. So today we're going to, so what this is the goal of the Colloquium of Collaboration is to bring scholars from disparate areas of research together to create a single research project. And we're going to start with the illustrious Shukura and Dianna Watkins. And their panel is called I Will Take Care of You, Breastfeeding, Doula Culture, African American Maternal and Maternal Care. And just to tell you about Shukura, her bio reads, she is a University of Memphis graduate student who began her doctorate program in health this fall, 2018. Her vested research interests include maternal and child health, breastfeeding narratives, images, and social norms, and the impact of those norms on women of African descent, along with the implicit bias and social determinants of health that affect a mother's ability to nurse her child with support and success. Shukura strives to increase awareness and education that surrounds the importance of social, peer, partner, continuity of care, and employer support for mothers actively breastfeeding and showing confidence. Dianna, oh, there you are. I'm sorry. So Dianna is pursuing a doctoral degree in communication. She is a United States Air Force veteran and currently serves as a chaplain in the Tennessee Air National Guard. Dianna is also an ordained itinerant elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And while at Memphis, she hopes to further study female military chaplains and the ways they navigate the complexities of military public space, maintaining denominational and culturally specific voice, beliefs, and liturgical practice theology. I'm sorry, 1 minute, guys. Before I bring them up and I'll announce the panel again, I just wanted to remind you all that you should have a ballot. Most of them are green sheets. And you will be voting, and the categories are listed here. It's pretty self-explanatory. So the categories are best overall research, most effective use of collaboration, and best presentation. So you're welcome to make comments while you're viewing these presentations if you are not really sure what to say or how you should meet. Evaluating the research presentation, so there is a guide for you on the back, and you're welcome to use it. You're not obligated to, and also remember that you are to vote for each panel only once. Okay? All right. And so now please welcome Shukura and Dianna, and they again are going to be doing I'll Take Care of You, Breastfeeding, Doula Culture, African American Maternal Care.
Okay, you all. So Joanna, thank you so much. Again, just real quick, my name is Shukura Irving. This is my colleague,
Dianna Watkins-Dickerson.
And actually, before we start, we wanted to open up with a video.
Anything?
I don't see it.
Don't charge my time now. There we go.
Kiersten, all right. Okay. All right.
Hatzit's beautiful daughter-in-law, Kiersten, entered here. She died last April after the scheduled C-section delivery of her second child. Her husband, Charles, filed a medical malpractice lawsuit this week against Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, claiming that Kira's death was the result of improper and untimely treatment.
You know, as we approach Mother's Day, because of the events that took place on April 12th, my sons will never be able to celebrate Mother's Day with their mother.
Everything seems to be going according to plan, but something took a terrible turn.
Absolutely. So we're talking about a woman that's not just in good health, we're talking about a woman that was in exceptional health.
No pre-existing condition.
No pre-existing conditions. But the troubling part, the thing I want to call attention to, when she was allowed to suffer and bleed internally for more than 10 hours, while myself and my family begged for the staff to take action.
And they did not.
And they did not.
So as Shukura is getting together our presentation again, I again want to thank you all for allowing us to speak in front of you today, and we want to ensure that we're bringing forth the incredible nature of maternal health, and I mean incredibly horrible nature of maternity health in the United States. And so go ahead with the overview. Okay, so just real quick, you all, we're actually going to be using two terms interchangeably. So I personally identify as a woman of African descent, whereas my colleague identifies as a Black woman. So just keep in mind, African descent, Black, same thing. And this particular presentation, because we're targeting the same population, no matter if she was born on the continent, in Jamaica, or in Memphis. All right, and so there are three particular questions that we're addressing as we're doing this research. What is a doula, and why are they important? Due to the fact Tennessee ranks 9th in U.S. maternal deaths, how accessible are doulas in Memphis, Tennessee? And finally, in what ways can doulas reduce maternal mortality rates in the larger African-American community? Okay, so everybody likes data, right? People love numbers. Okay, so this gives a quick overview, and this, mind you, this is 2013, so it's a little old, but stark contrast to women of African descent dying 44 deaths per 100,000. That's opposed to white women at 13 and opposed to women of other races at 14. Some of you may be wondering, how are these women dying? I'm so glad you asked, because we have a slide on that. So some of the bigger cases that we talked about, infection of sepsis, okay, preeclampsia, which is high blood pressure, cesarean section, we just heard a case about that, right? Cerebral accident, so just variations, it depends on race, class, gender, all these things, but at the end of the day, these are some numbers that explain why these women are dying. And so when we go on talking about doulas, we think that a definition is really helpful. And so defined as a primary service doula offer is continuous availability, doulas offer continuous availability and advocacy on behalf of the mother during the birthing process. Quote, a doula serves as a mother's advocate. So this does not mean that the doula takes charge and does everything, but she is an advocate. And as we know, if we're thinking about Black women, women of African descent, agency is so important. Particularly, they're not considered credible rhetors, right? And so a doula functions as their advocate. We also have some case studies, and we're going to go through these quickly due to time, but during the question and answer period, we might be able to talk about it a little bit more. So, Raising Soleil, Dr. Chillon Irving was an epidemiologist with the CDC. She died. She died from complications of childbirth about a week after she gave birth to her daughter Soleil. She and her mother both were telling the nurses, calling the nurses when they went back home, something's not right, something's not right, something's not right. And she actually died due to complications. She was actually hemorrhaging, and that's one of the details that we showed on the slide probably quickly on how Black women actually die from childbirth. And she said in her Twitter bio, and I think it's important to kind of highlight Black women's words, quote, I see inequity whenever it exists, call it by name and work to eliminate it, end quote, how ironic. Next, and these are the words of Judge Glenda Hatchett, who we all know from Judge Hatchett on television, right? But her daughter-in-law was Kira Dixon Johnson, with her husband actually giving that brief video and account of her death. And Judge Hatchett said, quote, we walked straight into a nightmare, end quote. And quite literally, they did. She died with 10 gallons of blood in her abdomen. And the GOAT, greatest of all time, Serena Williams. Well, if I had time, I would talk about how Serena Williams has been likened to the Hottentot Venus. I'd talk about Sister Citizen. I'd talk about Cynthia Rankin Citizen. I'd go all into this, but she says, quote, listener Dr. Williams, and this is as she was advocating for herself, she was actually having some pulmonary distress and had already had issues with this, right? And so she almost died. Thank goodness she didn't die. But even as she was advocating for herself, even as her mom was advocating for her, she was still not seen as, what was the case? She wasn't on the priority list.
She wasn't on the
Right.
None of them were, no. Okay, so the question now is, we know all of this, we just had case study examples. Why do doulas matter, and why should you all care, right? In terms of a mother and her continuity of care, I want you to think about what it means for her to have support from her family, support from her in-laws. Sometimes that's a real issue, and maybe if we have time later in questions, we can talk more about that. What does her provider support look like, and is her provider giving her agency to actually listen to her? We just heard of 3 case studies where these women and their families are advocating literally, and Kiersten, she literally laid there bleeding. I just went to the conference, and Charles spoke at the conference. And one by one, the nurse even came up to her and said to him, your wife is not a priority right now. I guess they had other pregnancy, labor, delivery, I don't know. But that's just, I have a problem with that. And so in terms of health communication, in terms of public health, what does that really look like? Does mom have information? And that's where doulas come in. Sometimes moms don't know how much power they have. We don't know as patients how much power we have. What does that emotional support look like? So these are just some things I want you all to think about. In terms of the health benefits, right, because we want to know, again, why does it matter? 12% more vaginal births. We talked about cesarean sections and how they're more likely to go from temporary to worse, or in some case fatal, but also it speeds up the birthing process, because no woman wants to be in labor for 38 hours. Thank you. Okay, higher outbar scores and higher breastfeeding rates, because breastfeeding matters, okay? All right, so making strides towards this. We are arguing today that locally, and here in Memphis, there is an organization, and one of my colleagues actually came out to support Dianna and I. She works for Birth Strides. It's a nonprofit here in Memphis where they specifically target women of African descent in low-income neighborhoods, which I think is awesome, because when you tie in social economic status and all these other things, they're more likely to have infant mortality, and more likely to give birth to babies with low birth weights and other things like that. So Birth Strides specifically targets you if you make a low income, and then they work with you and give you a free doula. How amazing is that? And so then, like, if I had time, I would show you cesarean stats and breastfeeding and how both of those have been impacted because of Birth Strides, okay?
All right, so taking care of Black mothers, and that's kind of why we centered the title around I'll take care of you. Who's going to take care of Black mothers? First of all, particularly as a rhetorician, I'm looking at how are we talking about this? Well, we're not talking about this. And so I want to be clear, this is not a performance. This is something that we are really delved into. We're researching this, we're looking into it, and it matters. Black mothers matter, well, maybe they don't, but they're not taken seriously, right? They're not taken seriously. We're not taken seriously as rhetors, whether we're giving birth or whether we're in pain. One of the things that doulas do help with is not just mortality rates, but also just making those birthing decisions. And so, from my own experience, some decisions that I wanted to make when giving birth, I was just shut down. It doesn't matter your Air Force affiliation, it doesn't matter how smart you are, it doesn't matter your socioeconomic status, right? And so, with that being said, we would like to push forward in researching how doulas can help regardless of socioeconomic status, because just because you're a celebrity, just because your mother-in-law is famous and has money, just because she knows how to go through the appeal process, that means nothing. It means nothing.
Okay, so just in closing real quick, I just want to highlight Birth Strides again and some other organizations. And below here, this is a breastfeeding support group known as B-Stars. I can talk more about that at the question and answer.
And so just to end quickly, this is a map of the United States and just demographics of maternal mortality rates. Remember, Tennessee is number 9, and out of the top 10, 50% are in the southeastern United States. So thank you so much for your time and for your attention.
Shouldn't you stay up for your question and answer?
Okay, yes.
Don't go anywhere.
Questions.
Was this a paper? I'm sorry.
It is a paper.
Oh.
Yes. I'm sorry. Tony.
Yes, great talk. So I just want to start off just by asking the question. case studies of women saying, I'm in distress, and not only the women, but like part of the race piece here is that her husband, right, is trying to be an advocate, and even that race is over-determining that, I think, right? So, help me a little bit in terms of research design. Like, what are the texts that you plan to look at, or the processes that you're going to be analyzing going forward?
One of the things, I think, because as a rhetorician, more like health comm, and doing this kind of media thing, so we're definitely coming from a Black feminist, womanist approach, right, as far as a theoretical approach, but really using the best of what we both have to offer. Of course, of that is our own particular epistemological purview. So the wisdom that we bring forward as a doula, as a Black mom, right? And so we're thinking about critical autoethnography in some of this. We're not really sure. In the end, I think we're probably going to stick toward these case studies and looking at that with the wider information of, statistical information kind of supporting that and driving how is birth strides in particular kind of in this little space of Memphis and kind of going with that. In future, maybe a focus group would be appropriate, but at this point, there's IRB and things. And so we're thinking about taking it slowly and looking at these particular case studies and how birth strides is something that we have concrete. There's not that much research about it. So, open to suggestions, but...
I'm just curious, I would be interested in kind of like looking at how these particular advocacy groups are making the case.
Mm-hmm.
And
that would be one way to start, and just as a, I look at text, so like that's what I would be thinking about on that.
And that's how I'm thinking right now.
So just to put in my little health conflict, so I couldn't agree more with Dianna, and it was such a pleasure to work with her on this. I think one of the things we really found out was, first of all, data on doula is very scarce, which is super devastating because we see that there's a need, but there's not much data out there. Second of all, data on doula in health comm or rhetoric medicine is extremely scarce, which is also problematic. So it was really difficult. Like we're using PRAMS, pregnancy risk assessment monitoring through CDC and through Department of Health. I use births, all these things. We have all these survey tools, right, that people get called and they have to do surveys, but none of these questions are asking about if you have a doula, if you have used a midwife, or if you had a home birth, because everything is focused on Western OBG. And I'm not saying OB is not the way to go. I'm just saying we need to be collecting this data, especially if we have all this data on cesarean and on all these preeclampsia things, but yet we have a solution and we're not even collecting data to see if people are using it. And I think that's problematic. So as a public health comm scholar, like part of the problem is there's nothing out there. And so like trying to like speak to that, right? And so like when I'm involved with Tennessee Breastfeeding Coalition, I'm involved with Shelby County, like I'm asking these epidemiologists, why are there no questions on these survey tools? That matters to me. So I'm here.
So my question is going to be kind of a follow-up to thinking about not only how you do this research, but then how you might translate it into something that would be applied, since it's obviously something that you're thinking of from an activist framework, right? So I'm wondering whether from the rhetoric side, if you've thought about some messaging, but also, Shukura, what I hear you saying is, why is everybody else doing this data? Why don't you do it? So have you thought about doing some kind of a survey tool that you could get out?
Yes. So full disclosure, everybody knows I came in like pro breastfeeding, like bro breastfeeding. But since being in this program, I got some people to talk to me, and I went to a doula training last semester. So I still wanted to be about breastfeeding for my dissertation, but I don't think I could just have it about breastfeeding and not have it about doula, because a lot of women don't even get to breastfeeding, unfortunately, because they don't even make it. And maternal mortality is a real thing. So yes, to answer your question, trying to find a way to foster all of that is exciting and scary at the same time.
I think you can do it.
Thank
My
you.
comment was meant to be encouraging.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important because I think Dianna mentioned earlier, doulas not really having a voice. So hopefully this dissertation can help raise that consciousness a little bit. I saw Laura and then Dr. Hendricks.
I was just wondering, thinking about like the perspective and work in the reproductive justice framework, how like often those folks really will consider like structural dynamics and the economic aspect. And I'm thinking that obviously with like health having been so much now like the neoliberalization of like hospitals and the profit motive and all of those things. So I'm wondering if that piece relates, which is not to say I'm saying like class supersedes race, but to say what's that profit motive dimension is it in the mix of the kinds of cases y'all are looking at?
I will say that we ran across an article that discussed Black mothers' maternal mortality rates increasing at certain periods of time. I think we all know a really big one, Brown v. Board of Education. And so, in so many ways, it's good. Integration is good, but in so many ways, Black women's voices have been stifled. And then, too, around that time is when kind of this neoliberalization of healthcare kind of takes place, and obstetrics takes over than midwives, right? So we've read about granny midwives. We've read about, how hospitals have become more integrated, of course, but also neonatal units kind of increase. And, just all of these things happening as healthcare modernizes, Black women are still yet pushed to the side. So, and I think Dr. Hendrickson, we have to stop according to Kalimba, but I don't want to not.
Well, I think there's gonna be time after, right, for more questions.
Okay.
Do you want me to ask you?
yeah.
Wait.
Oh, no, you can ask.
Let's hear it now.
I was just saying for the room.
All right, so my comment is kind of a question, and it's a question and comment combined, because Dianna, you talked about being a rhetor, but Shukura didn't really have a chance to identify herself. So I'm wondering what lens you are using, and that could be plural, for this work, and also out of all the possible paths that you can take now that you've identified the problem, which one are you going to take? What's the first stage? Because I didn't hear that. So help me out here.
So, Dr. Hendricks. Okay, so I think
This is to help you.
No, I know. I'm just trying to figure out which question do I answer first and how do I answer them. I think in terms of like putting more of myself, I guess identifying myself out there, I don't know. I guess I could have done more of that, but I felt like health comm was pretty represented in there, and I think.
But so you could be a quantitative outcome scholar.
Oh, I
You
see
could
what
be a
you're saying.
qualitative
I
outcome
see what
scholar.
you're saying. I see
That's
what
what I'm
you're
saying. See, Dianna kind of situated herself.
Right.
You need to situate yourself.
I am
What's the first path that, in the interest of time for you guys, what's the first path that you want to take now that you've identified this as a problem?
honestly, I think the first pass is to do the IRP. I think that's the first path. And then I am a qualitative health comm scholar all the way. I can dabble in mixed methods, but I love and I'm very much comfortable with focus groups, in-depth interviews. I've created an interview guides. That's where my heart is, and I already have access to this population too. So in terms of stakeholder and buy-in, I don't have to worry about that because I'm very active in the community. So I'm definitely qualitative. The question is just, I mean, how many interviews and where do I get funding to provide incentives? That's my question. And it's rhetorical because I know the answer, but just trying to figure out how to do that because I don't want to recruit sisters and not have something to give them. That's not right. So we'll take more questions afterwards. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
While our next presentation is getting set up, I'll just tell you about them. We have Andrew Carter and Laura Sullivan. Andrew is a Southern California native who is a current PhD student specializing in health communication. He received his Bachelor of Arts degree in journalism from California State University, Northridge, and his Master's of Arts in Communication Studies from San Jose State. His current research interests are focused on health-related messages as they pertain to areas of food and nutrition. And through this framework, Andrew examines elements of culture, power, and inequality, meaning construction, consumer participation, and voice in public discourses on health. I guess long bias. So this is Laura Sullivan, and she is a graduate student who has taught courses in writing, literature, film and media studies, and women's studies. And she's published articles on politics of the internet and during cyberspace, nature and neocolonialism, and the discourse of beauty, and in the film Watermelon Women. Hypertext, the politics of regeneration, gentrification, electronic pedagogy, and the effective dimension of activism. So,
I'm going to pass around this folder. Feel free to glance or take out an actual example of the reference from the chocolate bar. We're going to be talking about some of these, but I know some of you may want to see some of them up close. And then I'll just collect them all. Oh, I thought he was going to do it.
So the name of our presentation is Indulgence, Enlightened, Neocolonialism, Commodity Activism, Neoliberal, Ambivalence, and the Rhetoric of Fair Trade Chocolate Bars. So the global chocolate industry is a multi-billion-dollar entity. So in 2017 alone, the industry grossed over $103 billion, and by 2024, expected revenue streams are supposed to total over $160 billion. However, despite this rise and increase in chocolate consumption, it has not come without risks or problems. And the main problem here is the poor farm worker conditions associated with that. For example, underpaid wages, dangerous working conditions, and the most problematic, child and slave labor. So of the oppositional frameworks that emerged aimed at transforming these practices, one that is most recognized in the mainstream is the fair trade label. So the fair trade label essentially suggests or gives an opportunity for farmers to have livable wages, as well as the products that are marketed under the fair trade label are both socially and environmentally responsible.
So before I talk about the methods, just want to mention one other point of context for our talk, and that is the idea of the creation of the conscious consumer or ethical consumption. So we can notice that while conscious consumption has been a part of capitalism, that under neoliberalism, and the emphasis on individuality and style as a main part of identity construction, that ethical consumption has become much more entrenched. And then we're using a visual rhetoric framework and drawing on some different theories and methods. One is semiotics, Roland Barthes, the idea that signifiers have both a denotation of literal meaning and a connotation. Also, Foucauldian perspectives on discourse that talk about relations of power and subject formation, and also Althusser's idea of interpolation. Who are these ethical consumers that these discourses hail, and how do they respond?
So if you guys look at some of these different wrappers, really ones that are passed around or that you've seen at the store, or the ones up here, you'll notice one kind of overarching theme. And the theme here is that they tend to use kind of earth tone imagery. You'll see a lot of like burnt orange, a lot of forest greens, or a lot of different browns, and even the texture of the packaging you'll see is a little thicker than you see in traditional candy bars. A lot of times it almost has like a rustic feel to it. And the reason this is, research has shown that these kind of earth tone imageries evoke characteristics of warmth, wholesomeness, as well as naturalness. And when you look at some of the kind of food revolution movements, there is this idea of kind of getting your hands in the soil and getting back to the land. And this is really reflected in a lot of these dark chocolate bars, and the wrapping in particular. Another thing that you'll see evoked are appeals to health. And there are several examples of this. So for instance, here we have this Ultra Eco bar. One thing you'll typically see with dark chocolate bars is the cacao content or the cocoa content. This is important because over the past several years, chocolate has been marketed as the next kind of big superfood, right? So dark chocolate has been marketed or touted for its heart health benefits, reducing cholesterol, reducing the risks of heart disease, things of that nature. And then the research has also shown that to get the health benefits, you need 50% or above of cacao content. So you typically see the cacao content on the labels of the dark chocolate bars. In addition to that, you also see the USD organic label. You will see the USD organic label. USD organic means that 95% of products in the product are considered organic, certified organic by the USDA. No pesticides, no synthetic fertilizers or chemicals. You have the non-GMO Project Verified label, which is a third-party organization just making sure that the products are not, don't have any genetically modified organisms in it. So in addition to this, you'll see that the bars really care to one particular type of consumer, right? So they're kind of reaching out to one particular subject. And the subject here is the person who has the funds to purchase the bars, who has the health literacy to understand that not only are the bars a good health decision, but they're also pushing back against a dominant food system. Right? So these are all health literacy kind of things that are being promoted throughout this.
Yeah, so now I also want to talk about how nature and neocolonialism figure in this discourse from these candy bar wrappers. So one thing you'll notice in one of the ones we're passing around, when you open it, it says, this bar is restoring the rainforest. So that's a pretty hyperbolic claim and personification. And then you also have images of farmers and the of the newer ones have farmers planting a big tree. And the numbers that are used are really big. So over 1 million tons of carbon dioxide, over 2 million trees. You know, they make the consumer feel like they're making a significant difference, and they counter any feelings of hopelessness or people's guilt around consumption. And the neocolonialist aspect comes in where we have third world nature providing resources for the luxury and pleasure of people in the so-called first world or Western world. And notice how people of color are situated in these discourses. So for example, here, this young man stands in metonymically for all the brown farmers in Latin America. We also have dark Ecuadorian chocolate is refined by the Swiss chocolate maker, and the exotic ingredients in the third world are refined in Europe. So for example, the deep dark sea salt wrapper says, our smooth Swiss-crafted dark chocolate meets its match with a generous stirring of Fleur de Sel de Guarande, the world's most coveted sea salt. Hand-harvested from Brittany's ancient salt villages, this culinary treasure adds a subtle, watery crunch to the depth and maltiness of Ecuadorian cacao. So now we could go to the Tanzania one that's further down. So I want to talk a little bit about the white savior or the kind of commodified philanthropic aspect, where the liberal subject is hailed to help people in need. So here we learned from this bar on the inside, it says, enjoy the outstanding flavor of Tanzania cacao and smile, knowing that a portion of all proceeds are donated to help meet educational needs of school children in the district of Kyela Mievo region of Tanzania. Plus, our organic dark chocolate bar is made with fairly traded organic cane sugar. Enjoy and feel good about it. So direct appeals to the consumer feeling good about him or herself, but also to helping people in need. And if we could go to the next slide. There's a little image, a small image of a woman who's a farm manager in the Peruvian and Ecuadorian efforts of alter echo. But also in this later bar, we have Indian women, and we're told that there's a cooperative amongst these women that will be helped if you consume these truffles. And so that's another way that the kind of liberal discourse of global development and women's empowerment, kind of similar to microcredit and microfinance, is being promoted.
So despite this, some of the rhetoric is contradictory. Right? So what are some of the contradictions? For example, farming. So we kind of see this idea of kind of helping the farmer, right, and empowering the farmer. However, in West Africa alone, there's still over 2 million children working on cocoa plantations. And then cocoa-producing nations are still seeing problems related to unsustainable farming, including soil degradation, water and soil contamination through pesticides and fertilizers.
So some of the contradictions between the discourse as it's promoted and then the reality is that actually deforestation of the rainforest, they're at the highest rates ever recorded. For example, in Brazil in 2017 to 2018, over 3,000 square miles were deforested. So given the exigencies of global capitalism and the need for the profit rate to continue to rise and continue consumption, as well as a lack of political will to go against that, these trends will continue. In Tanzania, for example, you wouldn't know, but the government spends 9 times more on foreign debt payments than on healthcare, and people die at very young ages. And structural adjustment policies, programs promoted by neoliberal economic regimes require countries such as ones in Africa to privatize public institutions, including schools. So the cost of tuition for schooling is prohibitive for most young people, and the impoverishment of these places actually happens, that continues, and these kinds of mechanisms don't really do anything to help that.
So what is assumed in this? Well, there are several things that kind of go underlined, right? So when you look at these discourses, one thing is that consumers feel like they're contributing without much effort, right? So instead of, I'm not going to be able to go to the rainforest and actually physically do anything about it, but I can buy a bar and feel like I'm doing my part, right? Consumers are also given a false sense or a false picture of the world, the global political economy, third world people, workers and farmers, sustainability, environmental issues, as well as potential solutions. And there's also an overemphasis on the rhetorics of personal responsibility. Right? So again, if you're not able to participate in this, a lot of times it takes away the structural, it obfuscates or ignores some of these structural constraints that put a lot of these individuals in the problem that they were in to begin with.
Yeah, so just to end, we want to say that on the one hand, while these discourses obscure realities and they're very problematic constructions, that there's also something positive that I think we can learn from and take from them. So drawing on the work of Fred Jameson, who talks about in an article called Reunification and Utopia and Mass Culture, we can understand that there's a reason that these appeals are so seductive and that actually that could be something that we could take and use in our own resistance efforts. So if people are seduced by a paradigm that's linking personal health, helping others, including fighting back against worker exploitation and helping the planet, that's actually a somewhat hopeful thing that hopefully we can take in a different direction. Thank you.
5 minutes for questions.
Yeah, I'm going to ask the two of you the same question that I asked our previous two presenters. So you've identified the issue, and you've told us that there's significance to it. But where do you go from here?
Yes, so I think this is kind of how I see my research, is I think there's a gap, right? I think the public health, the kind of hard science people are seeing the problem in a particular way, and then we're over here in kind of the rhetorical, kind of more humanities field seeing it another way. But the two groups are not speaking to one another. So I think a lot of times when we do things like this, we do them as well-intentioned efforts, and a lot of times they actually reinforce the problem through stigmatization or not actually getting at the heart of the problem. Right? So a lot of times we have these top-down experts which are going in, seeing what they think is a problem, but on the ground level, that's not the problem at all. So you can create a solution, but the people that are actually experiencing it, it's almost like a standpoint theory, right? The people that are experiencing it aren't that intervention isn't going to connect with them. So I think there's a gap between what's going on kind of at the intervention level, bringing it down to what's actually happening at the ground level. So I kind of situate this as the missing gap of, we kind of need both of these disciplines to speak to one another, and I think doing work like this kind of illuminates some of that.
Yes. And Andrew, you saying that reminded me, I left out one point that I did want to make. That what's also obscured in the discourse about the rainforest is like you're going to help the forest, but there are indigenous folks who have been and are working in an activist context to fight the deforestation of their environment, and that's completely obscured as well. So I just want to get that in. So I think for me, I see we're going to develop this into something and try to get it published, and I think I see that there's usually two types of discourse around these kinds of artifacts. So one is like a wholesale condemnation, like they're terrible ideologically and they should be condemned in a wholesale fashion. The other is kind of more of a celebration of, people are caring about the world and commodity activism, to use a term that some authors use, is a positive development that we should celebrate kind of, not uncritically. But I think that if we can drill down more into what are the actual affective dimensions, what are the affective appeals, how can those are clearly being mobilized, how could they be mobilized in a different way? One thing we talked about, and an area for future research, I don't know if it would be us or someone else, but that actual consumers should be interviewed, and some data collected from what are their experiences, how do they talk about this, and see if you could do the analysis of the text and connect that to some actual experiences of folks and what they say about it.
So who actually is your target audience, though? As you move forward and you say that you're going to work together and you want to continue your analysis and you want to get this published, who's your target audience?
I would say telecom scholars, cultural studies scholars, media scholars, activists, food justice activists.
I think there's a wide range. I think you've got to look at it from a policy level down to an individual consumer level. So I think, we can look at this at kind of different ones interpersonally, kind of what's going on at the community level. You can address this at many different levels.
Thank you.
Hey, just a quick question. I think at some point somebody talked about guilt about consumption, and so there's some kind of softening, because of that. I would just push back against that a little bit. I don't know how guilty people in general feel about consumption. And I wonder about, either that or just forget about guilt. I think certain people might, but I think maybe another way to look at it was encourage you to think about the ways that this rhetoric both encourages guilt and the resolution of that guilt. In other words, by making visible the means of how these things are produced, that opens the space for that. So that would be one suggestion, right? So that you see see it internally as a kind of function of the text, rather than responding to some kind of just raw guilt that everybody's feeling about it. I would only say that because I'm sure that if you did the numbers, the market for things like Hershey's chocolate or whatever is way bigger than this.
Sure.
And people are just shoving it down their throat and nobody cares. You know what I'm saying? So I think that there's something there about that those texts are producing the same, that guilt that you're seeing is kind of pre-existent. I think that that's functioning inside of those. So I would encourage you to kind of think about that. And I think that goes with the Jameson piece as well, in terms of how contradiction works in late capitalism.
But you know, I think yes, and my speculation is that a lot of the people who are hailed or interpolated by these discourses who respond to them already know a lot about deforestation, already know a lot about the way farmers, particularly in coffee and cacao production, are the horrible labor conditions, the horrible pay rates, and so
How do you know that?
that's a speculation. But I would say from our conversations and other people that I know that consume these kinds of things, and also the discourse presumes that you know it.
Well, that's why Tony Moby said it's reaching to a particular subject.
Yeah.
The high health literacy to even understand what this stuff means.
Right. They wouldn't make it so visible. People already know.
But I think
they wouldn't have to use the images or the.
But I think that's the thing is if you know something about the labor conditions, if you know something about the environmental destruction, then their appeals, they assume that you know that and then respond by saying, but hey, here, help some farmers, here, help the rainforest, look how many trees we're planting, look how, so there is, I mean, I think actually a big piece of ethical consumption is that people do have some kind of, like, a lot of people that I know, all the activists that I know, like, feel guilty for even participating in this highly consumptive world. There's a feeling of like, oh, how would I step back from that? Well, I've got my non-disposable straw now.
I think that you're presuming that and then acting as if they're being doubly duped, right? Because if that's the case, then then that's even worse. They know about it and yet they're still consuming it this way. And so I don't know. I just want to encourage that in terms of like just as a kind of method point. Think about that as internal to the text rather than as kind of responding to this raw thing. I think interpolation doesn't actually presume that people think things ahead of time. As a model, as a theory.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, and also this piece of like what even would be ethical consumption under capitalism, like arguably that's not a thing.
Yeah.
So I think right on. Secretary's comment, but
What did you say? I heard it.
there's no ethical consumption under capitalism.
Okay.
So the other thing I would say, I don't know if you came across Craig Dickinson's article on Starbucks, but I think it would be super helpful for you. So he's looking at deforestation, but how this like green, the logo of this green, this woman, right, is sort of looks like this Mother Earth kind of figure, and then you go into the Starbucks, you smell the bees, it's natural, and so that covers over. So I think that might be really helpful for the arguments you're making. But my question is, are you incorporating in any way a transnational kind of analysis, thinking about how class travels across the boundaries over where this cacao and the sources? I like that you're thinking like where is it being refined, and even the idea of refinement of something coming from one location to another in order to refine it. What kinds of frameworks are you using or have you considered to think about how to connect globally the arguments that you're making?
Well, I think kind of in a sort of implicit way, obviously, like certain kinds of Marxist feminist, transnational feminism, post-colonial theorization, that kind of thing. But it's not something we've explicitly formulated right now. This was just a kind of, let's look at these. We both discovered that we had actually individually had thoughts about these very chocolate bar wrappers. And so we wanted to see what would happen if we started analyzing the connotations of the different elements. And so we haven't really gotten to the point, I mean, obviously when we write this up, we will be wanting to be more thorough in a theoretical kind of way.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, everyone, for the final presentation, we have Kiersten, who is a health communication scholar who studies specifically sexual and reproductive health. And we have Cameron, who studies media, studies gender and sexuality and pop culture. The title of their presentation is Presence, Portrayal, and Policy, Sexual Health and Education in Queer Porn Presentation Companies.
So I want you to think back to your first kiss. What season was it? Remember as much as you can. I'm not talking about the little peck that you got on the walk home in 3rd grade. I'm not talking about the loving kiss on your forehead when your guardian was taking care of you when you weren't feeling well. I'm talking about your first romantic, intentional kiss. Who leaned in first? Were you sitting? Were you standing? What did you do with your hands? What did you do with your lips? Your tongue? Your teeth? How did you know how to do all of this? So, through social learning theory Bandura and cultivation theory Gertner, we understand that we learn behaviors and attitudes through observation, specifically media, additionally media. So today, Cameron and I are going to discuss queer sex and queer health and how we learn about those two concepts through queer pornography. My name is Kiersten. I study specifically sexual and reproductive health, STDs, STIs, and contraception primarily. I am more of a qualitative scholar, but I do a lot of mixed methods things as well.
And my name is Cameron. I study media and sexuality, and specifically mediated representations of queer identities and queer bodies. Similar to Kiersten, I identify as a qualitative scholar, although I dabble with a little bit of mixed methods.
So thinking about those mediated representations, we understand that the media is not always inclusive in those representations. We're not seeing subsets of our population sometimes at all, if not accurately. And social inequality is also often associated with poor health status. Specifically, members of the LGBT community are at an increased risk for a number of health disparities, specifically as compared to their heterosexual peers. So STDs, according to the CDC, are additionally on the rise, and all of this fire is compounded by the fact that only 24 states in the United States require sexual education courses in public schools. If at all present, information about sexual orientation or sexuality in general does not have to be there. If it is present, some states even allow for it to be negative. So the way that we're learning this information about sex through formal channels isn't really happening. So how do we learn about sex then? Pornography. So Pornhub does an annual report that none of the queer porn companies, unfortunately, that we used do an annual report like this, so this is kind of where we're getting this information. 92 million daily average visits. So that's Canada, Poland, and Australia combined daily that people are visiting. Additionally, we understand that between the ages of 12 and 14, females and males is when females and males most often encounter pornography for the first time. So thinking about the failures of the formal channels, how we are learning about sexual education, sexual practices, and health, as well as the health disparity issues that we are facing, it kind of creates this hot burning fire that we need to address. And we're going to start with the literature review. So this is a great transition to kind of our theoretical framework. We're looking at these artifacts that we selected through the lens of entertainment education, which Harrington said was the process of embedding health-related information into popular media, specifically with the goal of changing your attitudes, behaviors, knowledge, that kind of stuff. So we know that queer sex education is lacking, specifically in the formal channels in the United States. So we are turning to other areas, porn as sexual education, and about 17% of women and 54% of men has sought various sexual health information directly from pornography, and this changes depending on what the topic that they were researching is. And this is even increased in the queer community.
So this brings us to our research question, which asks what policies about sexual health or entertainment education exist in queer porn production companies. For this project, we analyzed 4 different production companies, the first being Hemorrhoes.tv, which was founded in 2017 by YouTube personality Davey Wavy, and it is a queer porn company that focuses on men who have sex with men, as well as tutorials about role play, and different aspects of queer sexuality. The next is Lust Cinema, founded in 2010 by Erica Lust, and this is being marketed as an alternative to mainstream pornography. Next, Queer Porn TV was also founded in 2010 by Courtney Trouble and Tina Horn, and is touted to be a porn company for and by queer people. Finally, Nifty.org is an online collection of queer erotica that was founded in 1992 and is volunteer-run. This provides a unique perspective because it is the content is created by the users, and it is a departure from visual pornography. So as for the method for this presentation, for this project, we did a textual analysis of the about sections on each one of these porn sites, and according to Jonathan Gray and Amanda Lotz, textual analysis is a combination of different approaches to media studies, and this is very kind of indicative of the way that communication studies also came about. So for this specific project, we're using rhetorical analysis borrowed from the field of rhetoric, and a semiotic and semiological analysis borrowed from the field of linguistics. So in our analysis, we found that on Hemorrhoids.tv, there was no mention of condoms, sexual health, drug or steroid use in the about section. However, if you dug a little deeper and went to the blog section of that same website and an article entitled Grass-Fed Gay Porn, we find a commitment to no steroids, no performance-enhancing drugs. As far as the entertainment education aspect of this goes, this was integral to the foundation of this company. The about section was all over the entertainment education aspect of it. You'll learn new ways to improve your own sexual experiences. Davey himself said that he learned about gay sex by watching gay porn. Finally, they brought on tantric sex coaches and tantric instructors to help create these videos.
So thinking about Lust Cinema, in the About section, there was no information about sexual health. But if you dig a little deeper, all the way hidden at the bottom next to Contact Us, is how we make our films. And clicking on that, we see that there is a kind of manifesto that they've got going on. And it says, our shootings are a safe sex environment with every performer providing up-to-date STD checks, and performers choose whether they wish to wear a condom. This was the only company that mentioned STDs at all. Entertainment education, there was discussions of passion, intimacy, tutorials, romance, and kink. This is unique and kind of the departure from the traditional, lust-oriented pornography, both in conventional pornography and queer pornography. Moving to Queer Porn TV, nothing about sexual health at all. The entertainment education piece talked about prolonged makeouts, marathon sex sessions, and loving BDSM play. So tapping into that tutorial element of the entertainment education. I think it's really important to also note that they had an intentional absence of defining what is or is not queer sex. If we're considering this as entertainment education, how to have queer sex and how to do that in a safe way, refusing to define what is and is not queer sex is problematic.
Finally, with Nifty, there was no mention of sexual health in their mission statement, which was really focused on queer identity. However, in the individual submissions, there's tons of prefaces that include things like, this is a fantasy, always wear a condom. STDs aren't real in this universe, they are in ours, be safe. Play safe playing safe in sex is important. All of these rhetorics were part of the prefaces to the individual stories. As far as the entertainment education aspect goes, this was explicitly stated in their mission statement, which says that they hope this is a source of research, exploration, and scholarship. So actually saying that we hope that you learn from the stories that are published here. So altogether, what does all this mean? The focus on entertainment education in each one of these porn companies is unique and an interesting departure from other porn, which, as Davey Wavy said, is meant to make you come, not to teach you how to have sex. But what's really missing here, if it's mentioned at all, is conversations about sexual health. So we have this really unique aspect of education, but we're missing an important step in the explanation of how to have safe queer sex.
And that secondary focus of sexual health is a problem because we're not taking advantage of the chance to use this media, which we're already constructing as entertainment education, in order to address the health disparities that are present in these marginalized queer communities. So thinking ahead as far as future directions, obviously we'd like to see the formal inclusion of sexual health information both in regular, conventional porn and queer porn specifically, but we also kind of found an area for future research in the actual content. We did not look at any of the actual videos or stories, but just kind of digging around on the website, we noticed that Nifty makes mention of female condoms and dental dams, which if you know anything about me, I'll be very excited. So that is an area of potential future research that we could go in addition to the actual policies.
So in conclusion, the focus on entertainment education in these porn companies is an integral step in the progression of the way that queer people engage with and interact with porn. However, we're missing a huge opportunity to talk about the ways not only how to have queer sex and what that means, but how to be safe and healthy while doing it. Thank you so much.
As we open up the floor to questions, I would like to ask you in the interest of time to be filling out your ballot, because we're going to try to collect those at 3:20.
Dr. Henry?
So as I listen to your very well organized presentation here, I cannot help but wonder, you presented this and it was kind of genderless and raceless. So could you speak to that?
Yeah. So I think that is often one of the big missteps within queer studies and queer communities. And maybe not queer studies, but the discourse going on in the queer community often kind of says, hey, like, let's talk about us as a sexual identity and not about the differences that we may live with as queer members of color, disabled queer people, that kind of stuff. So in doing this, our focus wasn't necessarily about the actors or the models themselves, but about the policies that were being in place. And I think that should this project move into a place where we're analyzing the content, it would be incredible to bring that aspect in there. Like I, for one, don't know of any porn company that has like a how to put on a condom. I don't know anyone who teaches about dental dams or female condoms. I do, however, know that there was a YouTube video that was removed from YouTube and put on Pornhub where Bob the Drag Queen, a queer person of color, and Boomer Banks, also a queer person of color, gave a legitimate, actual, here's how to put on a condom tutorial. So that being removed from YouTube and put on a predominantly straight-centered porn company website is important. I haven't seen that pop up on Himrose TV. I haven't seen that in any of the research that we've done. So while this particular project was mainly about policy, I think that in future iterations of this, it would be really, we'd be really remiss if we did not include that.
You could have, I'm sorry,
No, you're okay. I was going to say absolutely, especially considering that social determinants start to compound, which leads to that increased health disparities. So once we start to look at the actual content rather than the policy, I think it would be really important to include, like, what is the gender of this human? We tried to, with some of the imagery, include gender non-binary, female males, interracial couples, all of that with some of the imagery in the PowerPoint, but we didn't really get to talk about it. I think when in the next iteration of this project, where we get to look at content, that would be really important to include.
So you don't want to seem, I get what you're saying, but you don't want to seem like you're clueless, and that you don't, you don't see that there's a need for that.
Sure.
So it could be something in a footnote, it could be something in a limitation, and we just acknowledge it and say, hey, it's not the focus of this particular project at this particular time. But we do acknowledge the need to do this kind of analysis. And then you just go on your happy way. Right?
First, just a kind of a note about the term female condom. I think that there's probably alternative terms to use for that could be a little bit more gender progressive. And I've seen this discussion on times. I've seen people object to this
Absolutely.
Terminology. The other thing is about thinking about the mainstreaming of this. So you talked about when you brought Pornhub up. I wonder if, and this isn't to prove this necessarily, just a kind of question, is that you see trends towards the mainstreaming, right, in terms of the porn industry, of these practices, sex ed practices, looking at, so I'm working at Pornhub and I'm looking at all these other places and trying to kind of build my thing. I'm going to be trying to co-opt maybe and incorporate some of this. It kind of relates to
click on it, and it's like you can Google stuff, like how to put on condoms,
Sure.
all that good stuff. So absolutely, that's a
So
great
that's
point. Is including,
happening.
yeah, it's
That's
happening.
happening in one place. There were some, we checked into a couple other different, for lack of a better word, straight porn companies.
Yeah.
And there was no about section. It was like literally here are the trailers for the porn that you want to watch.
You're not
for-
gonna read about
Yeah,
it.
for browsers, you had to choose 3 different categories of porn before they even let you into the website. So that to me was also really important because each one of these websites had like a mission statement or an about, or Queer Porn TV had a manifesto, whereas the straight porn companies didn't even have like they barely had like, here's our name.
That's a great point.
Yes, thank you.
So I think maybe you just answered my question, but I was curious why you chose the 4 companies that you looked at, like what we were including in exclusion. It sounds like maybe it's because they actually had this information, whereas others didn't. But could you say a little bit more about how you chose that sample? Why just 4 companies, not other ones?
Sure. So for me, one of the big inspirations for this project is the YouTuber Davey Wick himself. I've been following him for years, and when he came out with a YouTube video entitled "Breastfed Porn," I was like, what's going on here? And he's been a big sex positive worker for a long time, and so I looked into it, and I was like, oh, how interesting. He's creating this site to teach people how to have gay sex. And I just thought that was particularly interesting, and so when we dove into this project, we honestly just Googled top queer porn companies. And we wanted to make sure that there was queer bodies represented, and also, if not, like queer bodies running the place. So that was kind of why we included these artifacts. But
So a lot of the like view count was really high. Additionally, it was less cinema, I think. It was Queer Point TV. One of them won Best Feminist Porn Site on the Internet in 2015 and 2011, I think. So we tried to consider things like that too in selecting the artifacts.
any other questions? Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to kind of come around and collect these. I don't know, did you guys want to do an open discussion? That we do have on the schedule about 10 minutes for additional discussion if you guys wanted to ask questions to one of the presentations that are already gone and you hadn't had a chance.
I just wanted to make a comment on Andrew's and Laura's presentation. I'm thinking as I was listening to your presentation, I was thinking about my trip to Costa Rica, and I actually went to Café Grit, which is a coffee and cocoa farm kind of location, which it was this whole theatrical experience. You come in and someone comes and greets you, and they have this very heavily Spanish accent, and they welcome you to the farm, which wasn't really the farm, it was just really a part of the San Jose, and the farms are out in the mountains, so you really don't see the actual farm, but they have a mini farm in there, so you can go through the farm and see how you really are experiencing everything, and at the end is a coffee shop, and a coffee shop, and a chocolate shop. And this is a big company. Not only are they there, they're also in the airport, they're in all different parts of Costa Rica, and they're all parts of in the United States. So I'm thinking about how is tourism affected and intentional in bringing in people, luring people in, like, oh, you're eating this chocolate, but come to our farm and being part of the service learning and having that white saver compass. How is that feeding into that? So I was thinking about that. So as you guys are transitioning to evolve more in this paper, because I know it's in the formative stages, think about how tourism kind of plays a part in the actual country's economy as well as its people. Because I actually, when I was really excited because it was awesome, but after listening to your presentation, I was like, they're really putting us, they're like they're making us into these little puppets, basically, especially how they were over in their English accents, they were making it more like they didn't speak English that well. Actually, when I spoke to one of the ladies after, she spoke perfect English. Perfect English. So it's just one of the theatrical performance too, to having people in those.
Maybe we could interview you when we.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go to Costa Rica.
Yeah, yeah, and I actually have a hat. I was part of that consumption. You know, I was bored.
Right.
So,
Oh, I feel it.
definitely.
Yeah. No.
I have a comment just about the colloquium in general. And as I was listening to your presentations, one of the things that I thought was really neat is the co-presentation format that you have. So I want to compliment you on your first colloquium. I think that you've done a wonderful job with your setup. I really like the co-presenter format. And you know, when we go to conferences, typically, even though there may be several people who are actually on a study or manuscript, usually one person is the presenter. But maybe you should break the mold, and as you go to Southern, go to NCA, maybe since you've been able to work out a balance, maybe you should break the mold, and if there are two of you, you should both balance out and present. I really like that. So, and I want to compliment Joanna on her job as what I would say, not just chair, but facilitator, because a lot of times you go to a conference and the chair will just get up and say, well, we're just going to go in the order of the people in the program, and this is Olivia, and she's going to speak on such and such, and then they just sit down, all right, rather than really facilitating the session. And so Joanna has really worked hard to facilitate this session. So I believe that all of you were good presenters. One thing, Andrew, that I will say for you that you're going to have to watch out for is you are tall, and you have to get in there and you have to kind of scope out the room, because it's easier for you to get into the frame of the projector, and so part of your PowerPoint might be on your face. All right, so you've got to kind of watch that a little bit to stay closer to the edge and be able to maneuver around that projector. But all of you were really good presenters. The PowerPoints were awesome. And I think that you did a really superb job on this first colloquium. I'm really proud of you.
One of the things I hate about this room is that I can't teach without the projection in my face, and then you don't know it. You know, like, do you know
Yeah,
it?
the way it's
I
shaped.
you just don't know, right? It's just like, I feel like it looks so silly.
See, short people, we can just kind of like
Right, on the radar.
stealth, Oh, also, I wanted to say that it was really smart of you to invite the associate dean. Nice political move.
All right, Kiersten.
Yeah.
That created some nerves. Any other questions, you guys? We have a few minutes. I guess we're still counting up the votes. I know if you guys want to hang around to see the winners.
I think the participants definitely will.
Of course. Do we have any trophies?
We are very, very generously for the department getting $50 per group travel allotments per category.
Oh, I thought I was supposed to get from you guys.
Very fancy.
Yes. Yes. Not to get around this one.
He's a green. Andy
Thank you.
I was thinking about your that presentation. I'm like, I don't think I know. I said it was like anything sweetie I think about is like, how we get to this? How do we get
So like,
when we go eat our ice cream, it's probably an issue with it.
I don't know where the vanilla comes from. I don't know if it's from South America or Africa. It's what we do now. It's become proper.
You know what we do is
We don't know what's going on.
Right, exactly.
You have to think that's really indulgence.
Everyone, I'm sure you are all wanting to have fun things to do tonight, it's Friday night, and you're like, hurry up, it's time, right? Do I get out of this card, or?
No, it's not a gift card, it's just travel money.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right, I remember now. Okay, I'm sorry, I just feel like empty, they don't have a trophy or anything. All
You
right.
can give us high fives.
All right, so here are the winners. The first category, it was Best Overall Research. And that is Andrew and Laura.
oh, maybe it's wrong.
I am. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We're
like walnuts, like,
staying hard. I'm sorry.
Best presentation.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, I should have dealt with it. All right. I couldn't read their abbreviation. Okay, that was wrong. All right. The Kiersten Chambers. I messed up.
Just say it right.
I should have changed on. Okay. Best effective use of collaboration. Okay, that's Shukura and Dianna. And Andrew and Laura did win, of course. Not losers. For best presentation, Andrew.